You're listening to Catholic Chicago. Ahead, the Archdiocese of Chicago brings you programs about the people, events, and issues that touch our lives. Welcome to Catholic Chicago.
Good morning. Welcome to Catholic Chicago on WNDZ 750 AM. I will not give the phone number today because today is Memorial Day. So Memorial Day blessings to all of you. Remember all our loved ones and members of the U.S. who gave up their lives in service for their country. But the program today has been pre-taped for playback today on Memorial Day. But you can also get us on YouTube.com/Catholic Chicago, YouTube.com/Catholic Chicago, and Father Greg Sakowicz, Director of the Cathedral, co-host Mark Teresi. Good morning, Mark. How are you on this Memorial Day?
My last days as Executive Director.
But then you'll stay with us part-time.
Yes.
You're not going anywhere.
We'll work on the 175th.
For the Holy Name Cathedral, which will be in next year. And now, before we began the program for this morning, you said you had a great Memorial Day story.
Yeah, my father was in the Catholic War Veterans at St. Michael's Parish. They would meet regularly. But one of my great memories as a young person was my dad would take me to Mass on Memorial Day at St. Boniface Cemetery. So people will be hearing this early enough that you can probably Google Masses today at Catholic cemeteries and maybe attend one of the Masses at one of our cemeteries in honor of, those who have served our country so well.
And by the way, that's been a long-standing tradition. All the cemeteries, Catholic in the Archdiocese, they have a presider and a beautiful Mass. And we don't know the weather right now. It is now Memorial Day, but we were taping this earlier, so
it's beautiful. Beautiful outside.
It's beautiful outside. What's your story, though?
That's the story. That it's a wonderful memory that I have of my dad and I. We didn't have a car, so we'd take the bus, Clark Street bus, to St. Boniface. We'd go to Mass. We might go out afterwards for a sandwich. But it was just my dad taking me to something important to him.
Now, how old were you?
Oh, probably it started maybe when I was 5 or 6, and then probably the next 5-6 years every year.
So he was a World War II vet?
Yeah.
Where'd he serve?
Philippines, I think.
Wow, the Pacific Front.
Yeah.
The Pacific area, and we have a great program lined up. We have with us live in studio over those pre-taped for the first time not in 3 years via Zoom, Dr. Edward Gordon, a writer, historian, teacher, well-known and asked for speaker for many, many years, a very active member with his wife Elaine at Holy Name Cathedral. So Dr. Edward Gordon, it's great to have you in person.
Yes, it's great to
for
be
the
back.
program. You've been on so many times from home in Chicago or Zoom, also from YouTube, California. And so welcome. This is the first time you've been in studio since February of 2020.
Well, the studio looks great.
Isn't it beautiful?
Yes, it's very nice.
Great work
And
of
it's great to
Michael
be here.
and Brian and the team.
And you're not in your pajamas.
That's
I never am in my pajamas. Please,
Those times
please.
when it was on, remember in the very beginning before the studio was for YouTube, it was a phone hookup.
That's right.
But you always had your cup of coffee. You have your cup of coffee now. And
Yes, I do. Here it is.
And Edward, when COVID broke out and things were shut down mid-March 2020 for 3 full months until June 15th of 2020, but then that summer of 2020, restaurants were closed.
Yes.
The beachfront was closed.
Yes, everything.
Many places were closed. The cathedral had just opened up to a limited number of people, 200. Here we are in now end of May 2023, so 3 years plus. We'd always ask you on the program, what inning are we in? The first time you said, like, bottom of the first, so it just started. Then you said the third inning, seventh inning, top of the ninth.
Oh,
what inning? Go
extra innings.
ahead. Extra innings.
Extra innings.
When COVID reappeared again.
Well, now we're in the World Series.
So we're coming to the end of the season?
Yeah, no, we're in the World Series.
Okay.
Because COVID, of course, the emergency is officially over.
Now what does that mean?
Well, that means that it is no longer an epidemic, all right? But it has not reached the point yet of being something like the flu, where it is contained and controlled. It is, it's very appropriate that we're doing this program for Memorial Day because 1.1 million Americans have died from COVID.
1.1 million Americans?
More than in all the wars of America combined.
Wow.
Think about that for a moment. Now, 6.3 million have died worldwide. Now, you're going to say, well, that's a huge number. We're a country of 360 million people. Well, of course, we have a lot of older people here. We have a lot of people who are obese. And those two areas, those two groups were very, very susceptible to COVID. And COVID, long COVID, still persists.
Now, let me ask this question. I have several people who I know suffer from long COVID.
Yes.
For example, brain fog, problem with vision and seeing, where their
Yes.
eyes don't want to cooperate,
Yes.
imbalance, loss of hearing, loss of taste.
Yes.
And for some, it's been going on for 2 years now.
Yes.
Others,
Yes.
when they had COVID, didn't even know it, hardly anything, maybe sick for 1 day, and they're fine. How can there be such an incredible difference with human beings?
Well, about 15.5% of the people that had COVID have long COVID.
Wow.
And the greatest proportion of those individuals are healthcare workers.
Really?
Who were
'Cause they've been
repeatedly exposed.
Yeah.
Right. And it would even have been higher if we hadn't had masks. Masks were very important in limiting the death toll, particularly before we had the vaccines.
Now, I've read more than one article that studies have shown. I mean, I get all these studies that talk about
Yes.
should not have been vaccinated, should be vaccinated.
Yes.
Should not have worn a mask. They're a waste of time.
Yes.
Wear a mask.
Well, the largest study on masks just came out, and it conclusively proved that masks helped to limit people getting infected and dying. There is no doubt masks are effective. When I volunteer at Northwestern University hospitals, I just started back now for the cathedral
Communion.
as a minister of care, I am still wearing a mask, particularly in those rooms, ICU, CCU rooms, all right? Because those people have, most of them have very weakened immune systems, all right? So that is still, and right now you must understand that we're still getting about 250 deaths per day in the U.S. from COVID.
250 a day?
250 a day.
And
Around.
talk
yes.
about the vaccine.
Well, the vaccine is very effective. Without the vaccine, we would have probably had 3 or 4 million deaths in the United States.
How many died in the plague of 1918?
Proportionately, I don't have those exact numbers in front of me. I'm sorry
But
to say.
it was a great number.
It was much
and there was
higher.
no vaccine.
Much
It was much higher because there was no vaccine.
Yeah.
All right? Think of polio for a minute. How many children contracted and died from polio? Now, Cardinal George contracted polio. He's older than I am, but in the 50s, I had both the cube and later a shot.
I remember
All right?
that.
Right. And my mother and father kept me away from other children and public places until I had that. Of course, I was oblivious to that at the time. But right now, about 82% of Americans have had at least one shot.
82%.
82%.
Okay.
All right.
That's a lot.
Yes, but that's only one shot. Only 43% have been boosted.
And there's isn't there a third and a fourth shot too?
I just had the fourth shot.
Yeah.
Now,
Right.
we had two. I had 2 vaccination shots. I've had, I think, 3 boosters.
Right, and there's a fourth one available now that's been approved by the CDC.
Okay.
All right? And
Especially if you're over 65.
you should get it, even
Okay.
though you're trying to tell us you're only 40. you should get it. Both of you should get it because you are at increased risk. And that does not mean you will not get COVID. I know people who have had all the shots and have gotten it, but they had a mild case of it, and then they got a drug prescribed by their doctor to help them heal at home so that we're not admitted to the hospital. All right?
Interesting.
Yes. So, people say, well, why is it that Africa had such a lower death rate, et cetera? Well, Africa has a very young population. Also, the African peoples are exposed to many types of viruses, so they may have stronger immune systems than we do. All right? And many of them are not overweight. Many of them are very much underweight. So those are important factors. However, we also must realize that many countries still underreported and when you look at the surplus deaths, meaning the people who died, the death rate jumped tremendously during the COVID emergency. And there are people that died of COVID that we have not yet counted. So the number of 1.1 million is probably low. This year alone, we could exceed another 100,000 deaths from COVID across the United States. So again, don't think that COVID has disappeared. It has not.
So practically speaking, the 18% that you said have not had
Any shot.
Right.
And if they're older, people, they're at risk, greater risk.
And what should be the behavior on our end? Because there are folks I know that have had parties, family parties, have said, if you're not vaccinated, you're not coming.
Right.
Is that still?
Yes, I would, particularly for the older people that might attend.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yes, I would recommend that.
Okay.
Then along those lines, Edward, is what should we be doing day in and day out with COVID still out there? And first of all, basketball games, capacity crowd, hockey, baseball, football, we're back to normal size crowds. And wedding receptions, 200-300 people, gatherings, a cathedral. We had for Mother's Day Mass. Yesterday, our 10:30 Mass, about 1,000 people.
I was there.
And it was packed.
I was there. I almost ran out of hosts as a Eucharistic minister.
It was absolutely
packed. It was packed, yes.
So I think now, what precaution should we be doing day in and day out?
2 things. 1, make sure you're fully vaccinated. 2, have a COVID test at home, and if you feel the symptoms, test yourself to see if you have it. If you test positive, go to your doctor and have him confirm that you test positive. And or if you get really sick, call your doctor immediately and have him prescribe the antiviral medications for you to take.
What about a church attendee? What kind of behavior should they exhibit to play it safe?
The same. And if you're older, if you're overweight, if you're medically compromised with other conditions, wear a mask. Wear a mask.
Okay, on that note, Mark.
We'll take a little break. WNDZ 750 AM, Catholic Chicago. 312-254. Oh, we're not giving the number today.
We are pre-taped.
You can go to YouTube, though, today.com/Catholic Chicago. And we'll be back with Dr. Edward Gordon in a few minutes and continue our conversation. Update on COVID. What should we be doing to keep ourselves safe? We'll be back in a few minutes. Please stay tuned.
Caring adults make all the difference in the lives of adolescents. Catholic Charities understands this, and our mentorship programs provide a free opportunity for young adults to spend time with volunteers who genuinely care about them. This program is ideal for youth aged 9 through 12 who may need support navigating the challenges of childhood and early adolescence. Our amazing volunteers serve as friends who help youth recognize their strengths and empower them to reach their full potential. Catholic Charities conducts a thorough background check on every volunteer, and our program coordinator closely monitors and supports every relationship. Mentoring is a fun after-school program that can help young adults build confidence and enjoy fun activities with their peers, too. To learn more, visit CatholicCharities.net or call 312-655-7970 in Cook County and 847-782-4224 in Lake County. We're connecting youth with great role models. Join us today.
People always say, how can you spend your day with 3-year-olds? Seeing the changes that they go through and just the journey and how they grow, this is a very rewarding job. Even though at the end of the day, we're not the highest paid people on earth. And when I have a parent contact me and say, my child loves school, that to me, I'm setting that foundation for their love of learning. Because really, you are changing lives, you are molding lives.
Shape the next generation of leaders. Teach. Apply today at archchicago.org/schooljobs.
Do you have an old bicycle that's not being used? Consider donating it to Catholic Charities Veterans Bike Project of Lake County. Skilled volunteers are refurbishing bicycles to make them safe and ready to be used by veterans to get to and from their new places of work. We also gratefully accept financial contributions that are used to purchase bike helmets and other safety accessories. Our veterans have faithfully served the United States, and now it is our privilege to serve them. For more information on the Veterans Bike Project of Lake County, call 847-782-4219. That's 847-782-4219.
We're back, WNDZ 750 AM, Catholic Chicago. Go to youtube.com/Catholic Chicago. Father Greg Sakowicz, Mark Teresi here with Dr. Edward Gordon.
And today we are pre-taped on this blessed Memorial Day.
Right. Let's remember all of those who fought for our freedom. Remember them in prayer. Generations of folks that fought for our freedom.
And I would add all the healthcare professionals who fought the COVID battle and died.
Yeah.
Many of them died.
Unsung heroes.
Yes.
They sure
Absolutely.
Are. They sure are.
Do you have a good question with a good doctor?
Yeah, so when we look to COVID now,
yes,
where did it start? Did it start in China? How?
Well, there's a big controversy. Mm-hmm. Now, there are two camps. One camp says this was a conspiracy of the Chinese Communist government that invented this virus to use as a weapon against everyone. And it got out of hand in China, and it also spread across China. That's one. There's a lab in Wuhan where they said, well, it originated from that lab. The other group said in Wuhan there was an open market, and they sell various food of exotic animals. So if you like to eat a bat or some other, a ferret or something else, that it came from an animal and spread to us. And that's not unusual. Remember, the Spanish flu started with chickens. Mm-hmm. All right? So why don't we know? I'll tell you why we don't know. Because the Chinese government will not cooperate with the World Health Organization to examine the records and the information in that lab.
Wow.
They simply will not collect.
Now,
now they're saying that it originated in the United States.
Who is they?
The Chinese government.
Are saying that we
The
started
Chinese
it.
communists are saying that we invented COVID.
How can that be when?
We didn't.
Yeah.
We didn't.
Okay. You asked a question. Where did it start? But be very answer. But how did it start? I know you talked about
It started
the
there,
animals, you
and
talked
it
about-
started in Wuhan, and it spread more rapidly than previous viruses because people from China then went to Europe. They went to New York.
Something called airplanes and ships and
That's right.
Will we ever know how many people died in China?
That's a very good question. Probably not.
But it had to be
Probably not.
tremendous number of people.
Yes, we think so, but we don't know the exact number. And that's true for many other countries.
Can I back up? Why did you say we're in the World Series now?
Because COVID could come back.
It could.
Another virus. Well, another variant. Now, we are better prepared today than previously. We have now set aside funds to help public health organizations across the country, if we can find the people for them. I'll talk about that in a moment. But we are better prepared with labs to more quickly develop another vaccine than we were before. And we don't have a government whose official policy is wavering in terms of whether or not this is a serious epidemic or it isn't. This is very serious. Remember, last year, 225,000 Americans died of COVID last year. Keep that in mind, all right?
Wow.
And remember, each time one of these viruses like COVID come, they are new. So we could have, instead of COVID-19, we could have COVID-24. Now, COVID-24 could be a mutated, very mild variant where a lot of people will not get sick.
A couple of observations. Number one, when things shut down in 2020, and for such a long time, and people afraid to go out, it was truly a game changer on every level. Number two comment, and that is, when you say 250 people a day dying in the U.S. now,
Yes.
you do the math, in a year, that's over 100,000
Yes.
dying in the U.S. alone.
Yes.
Number three, now the question for you, Edward, is that you also have a profound background in education. You're an educator, teacher, writer, historian,
Yes.
researcher. What was the effect on the education system?
A disaster.
Okay, say something about that.
Well, let's put this in. Actually, now this leads into really the second half of the program on the U.S. economy. You know, the underlying truth that supports the U.S. economy is an educated workforce. Children in elementary and secondary school need a solid, basic literacy education that fits this economy. Even before COVID, we only had at best a third of our students coming out of high school who had enough literacy to do well in college or a trade school or an apprenticeship. Now, COVID has made this worse. We have a huge number of individuals who now test below basic. That means you have people coming out of high school reading at the 6th grade level more than ever before.
Coming out of high school?
Yes, if they even graduate from high school.
Wow.
Now, parochial schools are somewhat better than the public schools. Small town America, rural America is a little bit better than urban or suburban. But the big lie that I must emphasize to your audience is that the majority of students no longer have the necessary educational skills to get a good job in this economy. Most students are tragically now undereducated in our country because we refuse to recognize that this is the 21st century and that our school systems are still geared for a 20th century economy. And this is a great, great, great social disconnect. That's why we have anywhere up to 12.5 million vacant jobs across this country. That's why the economy lost up to $2 trillion last year because we couldn't fill those jobs. All right? This is a job market fire. It's helping to cause inflation. It will cause more debt, and we'll talk about debt in a little bit. But the internal system of education to employment is now broken and needs to be rebuilt at the local and regional level across the U.S.
Now, Edward, if this were a debate right now, would someone say to you, Dr. Gordon, I disagree with you?
Yes, they would, because they would say, oh, no, the test results, more and more students are graduating from college, more students are graduating from high school. Yes, but the National Assessment of Education Progress, the NAEP, that tests 4th, 8th, and 12th graders in reading and math and periodically in history, shows the worst results that it's ever had over the years it's been done. This is by the Department of Education. And that includes parochial education as well as public education. All right? So, can we afford to have the majority of high school graduates, when you ask them, where is Africa? And they say, well, that's a country. Can we afford to not have enough high school graduates who can write an essay or even a complete sentence, let alone a foreign language? What about the necessity for people to be a good problem solver because they read and read well rather than just scanning a social media device? The data, I've been in touch recently with the head statistician of the NAEP because I included this data in my latest white paper, Job Shock, which talks about the effect of COVID on education, all right? And this is a national crisis. I remember when Elaine, my wife, and I had a rollout for Job Shock, and someone at the rollout asked my wife, who co-authored this, what was the biggest thing that she was just couldn't believe. And she said that most parents simply deny that their child is poorly educated. These are white parents, Hispanic parents, other minority parents, city, suburban, coast to coast. Now, that's not to say that a third of kids are getting a good education, but that is inadequate. By 2030, 70% of all the jobs will require that high school 12th grade students read and have math and writing skills at a 12th grade level. All right? And that we should be able to do because the majority of our kids have at least average intelligence. We're not asking, something that's impossible to do.
Where did you find out, are the parents in denial?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. It's just very simple. It's not my school. My child's getting a great education. They're getting A's and B's. There was a beautiful article that talked about this in the L.A. Times recently about a Hispanic parent, and her sons were in a high school in L.A., and they were getting A's and B's in math and science. And then they took the state test, and it showed that they were both below grade level. So what's the problem? Well, I'll tell you what the solution is. The solution is we need to get rid of all the standardized tests. The ACT and SAT people are saying, well, that's not fair. It's discriminatory. You should get rid of all standardized testing. Now, I completely agree that teachers should not just teach the test. All right? That's stupid. And also, there's a lot of other factors involved here besides the teachers. The support of education in the home, the value of learning.
And inquisitive minds. Inquisitive minds, if everything is programmed and you type it in and you're on a laptop, you're not thinking the way Sister Mary Alice taught us in 5th grade to diagram a sentence.
Well, with ChatGPT, who needs to learn how to write? You'll just ask the computer, it'll come up with the essay.
Do you remember, this is just a memory, but in terms of research, so we're in high school in this building, Quigley. Where do we do our research? At the Cultural Center, which was the library. You had to do the microfiche and all that stuff. I remember you were saying that you were looking for something of research, and they tore the page out of the book.
The Time magazine. I was researching. I was doing
but there was a huge process to getting to what we were learning.
But the difficulty is when we were in high school and college, only 30% of the jobs required advanced, higher level reading and math and writing. And that's now true for 70% of the jobs.
Oh, wow.
70% of the jobs
require
folks.
High school education.
Right. And if we stay on this course, we have calculated that there will be 150 million adults in the workforce who will only be fit to work in basic jobs.
Wow.
Right now, there are 130 million Americans who read between 6th and 8th grade or worse. Right now, today.
On that note, Mark, take us to break.
Okay, WNDZ 750 AM, Catholic Chicago. You go to youtube.com/Catholic Chicago, Dr. Edward Gordon. When we come back, I want to ask you how other countries are looking
I will be happy to talk about
at their education and their workforce, because that could be a battleground for countries. Particularly,
I wrote a book called Winning the Global Talent Showdown.
Good. Well, we'll talk about it when we get back. We'll be back in a few minutes. Please stay tuned.
Catholic Charities' Family Self-Sufficiency Program has assisted thousands of single parents who are working to become more self-sufficient through education and employment opportunities. Our experienced case managers accompany participants for up to 5 years on their journey to identify, address, and break down barriers to improving their quality of life and achieving meaningful goals for themselves and for their families. Professional, compassionate assistance is offered in a safe and trusting environment as participants develop the skills needed to become financially stable and able to support themselves. Every achievement starts with a decision to try. To learn more about Catholic Charities' Family Self-Sufficiency Program, call 847-782-4233 or visit CatholicCharities.net.
I am a seminarian.
The Church needs compassionate and well-trained priests to help guide each of us through life.
What inspires me, what draws me always to the priesthood is continue to see priests be a beacon of hope for other people.
You can play a part in the education of these young men as they prepare for a life of service to others.
I want to be that beacon of hope too, and it sets my heart on fire.
To support our seminarians, make your gift at archchicago.org/seminarian fund or call 312-534-7959.
The cemetery ministry is a core ministry of our Catholic faith tied to the corporal works of mercy. It's comforting to know that our Catholic cemeteries are caring for the remains of our loved ones awaiting the resurrection. There are 44 Archdiocese of Chicago Catholic cemeteries willing to help you in your time of loss. Call 708-449-6100 or visit CatholicCemeteriesChicago.org. Catholic Cemeteries, serving the Catholic community since 1837.
You're listening to Catholic Chicago. Ahead, the Archdiocese of Chicago brings you programs about the people, events, and issues that touch our lives. Thanks for letting us be part of your morning. Now again, Catholic Chicago.
We're back. Catholic Chicago, WNDZ 750
You were
AM.
so dramatic.
I know. Thank you for sharing
Wow.
that. I just thought the dramatic pause would be helpful today.
Yeah,
YouTube.com/Catholic
edge of my chair.
Chicago. You got to laugh a little bit because this is serious stuff we're talking about.
It is.
Yeah.
And before the break, we're talking to Dr. Edward Gordon about the impact of education. What about other countries? How are they dealing with these issues?
This is a global problem.
And could you explore that with us?
Yes. Well, we are in the fourth industrial revolution, which requires the average person, the average child, to be better educated in the 21st century than in the 20th century.
When did the fourth revolution industrial begin?
It began after the computer revolution in the 70s.
Okay.
This is now, or in the cyber space revolution, all right? I mean, look what we're doing here, all right? Now, people think, well, you can click for brains. No, you can't. You can click for information.
Correct.
But you can't necessarily understand.
Why am I saying correct to you? You're the master.
Well, you can get information, but do you know what to do with it? And do you know the source? Is the information correct?
Exactly.
Right now, there's tremendous amounts of propaganda.
Right.
All right?
Right.
But the projection by
Here's
the world...
Here's a great line that I would have heard a long time ago. A guy says, he got all A's and flunked life.
Well, that also, you can have a lot of knowledge, but you can't relate it to people.
Right.
Exactly.
And that's happening now. Greg, I just gave you some information about all of the young people committing suicide.
Yes.
Because they have all that media, but they're so depressed because they're all alone.
Yeah.
All right? They're alone. They don't know how to have a conversation.
Yeah.
But that's
like what we're doing here.
That's profound. That is profound.
Amen.
I had a suicide rate going up.
I had a student once say to me, Dr. Gordon, someday you have to teach me how to have a conversation. Let's put this in context, though.
That's amazing.
The World Economic Council says that by 2030, the United States may have up to 30 million vacant jobs. The world will have 95 million vacant jobs.
We're talking less than 7 years away.
Correct. Now, I've been writing about this, the skills job disconnect, since 1991 when I wrote a book, Closing the Literacy Gap in American Business. Then I wrote a book called The 2010 Meltdown, the year the boomers started retiring. And we have 79 million boomers retiring by 2030. And all that, a third of them are highly skilled people. Then I wrote a book called Winning the Global Talent Showdown, how this is all over the world because the fourth industrial revolution is worldwide, all right? And many countries, their populations are shrinking. Germany, 100,000 a year. Italy.
You said Japan.
Japan, Russia, France, Britain, Canada, Korea, all right? China now, for the first time, will start shrinking. So you have a demographic issue, but you have a bigger misunderstanding of the educational realities of what is going on right now.
Okay, now, Edward, you've spelled out the problem beautifully. What is or are the solutions?
Okay, let's drill down to Chicago.
Okay, make it very local.
Only 23% of Chicago public high school graduates who took the ACT test, I think a year or two ago, showed they had enough skills to enter any form of post-secondary educational program successfully, whether it's a certificate, a 2-year degree, apprenticeship, a 4-year degree. What does that mean? Well, that means you have a lot of young people who are graduating from high school or who have dropped out, who have a very weak general education. So what do? Well, they get a basic skills job. Well, there are not many left, and they don't pay that well, even though the minimum wage has gone up. So what happens? Well, let's see. they see all this affluence around them. They have no future. They have no hope. They have no money. What results? You just saw it. When I was out in California, you had that riot downtown.
Right.
Now, are those bad children? No. Many of them are desperate. They have no future. So they join gangs, some of them. They get guns. So what's the solution? More police. Social workers. Those are Band-Aids, but if you're poorly educated, what kind of future do you have? Whether you're white, black, Hispanic, Chinese, I don't care who you are, male, female, bisexual, what kind of life are you going to have? Well, you want to be middle class. You want to have enough money to have a home, a car, etc. How are you going to get that? You're going to get that by having the education needed for today's job market. Mm-hmm. Now, when I say we have 12.5 million vacant jobs, I also say that companies aren't training. Right now, there are 27 million American adults who could be trained for those jobs who are out of work.
And they're not being trained?
No.
Why?
Because companies do not want to invest in the workforce. Only about maybe a quarter of American businesses will train workers. The rest will not. Why? Well, many businesses today are run by financial groups, and the financial groups' chief role is to make sure that they get the greatest profit in the shortest time possible. They own hotels, they own supermarkets, they own airlines, they own many businesses.
So it's about the bottom line.
It's not about the business they're in, it's about making money. Mm-hmm. These are money-making machines.
And, and disproportionate in terms of how people are rewarded.
Well, that's also true. Yes, that's correct.
That's a big part of it.
That's also, but the people are disposable.
Mm-hmm. At which level?
All levels.
Okay.
All levels. So, robotics, more automation. But the more automation you get, the more complex the remaining jobs become. Mm-hmm. So, you have robots building cars, all right? Who programs the robots? Who repairs the robots when they break down? Who manages the robots? Those people have to have a better education.
And who creates the next generation of robot?
So let us say what happened between 1970 and 2023. In North Carolina, they had large numbers of clothing manufacturers, weavers, all right? They discovered if they took that out of North Carolina and took it to China, where they only got 25 cents an hour, they could make the same product and save all that money. So they laid off all those people. Now, those jobs are coming back to the United States.
Why?
Cost of transportation. Wages have gone up in China. Endemic corruption of officials throughout China. So now they come back to the U.S. I own the factory. Before I had 4,000 people working in that factory making socks. Now it's run by computers. It's automated. I now have 1,400 people. But they all have certificates, 2-year degrees or 4-year degrees. They have better quality. They can make it faster, and they're close to the market so they can batch it differently, customize it. Well, what's the difference between the 4,000 people in 1970 and the 1,400 people today? What's driving this? It's a conspiracy. It's the Republicans. It's the Democrats. It's the Chinese. It's whoever you want. No. It's the Fourth Industrial Revolution. This is going on all over. All right, 1970. You have prostate cancer. What are they going to do for you? Not much.
Yeah.
Now 2023. You go in. You have robotic surgery. You're cured. Mm-hmm. What's the difference? The difference is the people in those operating theaters, more training, more education than in 2023 than in 1970. Mm-hmm. When you talk about modern miracles, we all expect them. Yeah. Yes. So what are we doing? We are loading up children with after-school activities. Sports are important for children and adults. We have gone sports mad. Sports have become so absolutely overpowering in people's
Especially
lives.
with young people say, I'll make it out of the situation I'm in by becoming a basketball player, a football player, a baseball player, but that is such a narrow funnel. It's a dream that very, 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 very few make.
There's a movie about that. It's called Hoop Dreams.
Yes.
It was a wonderful documentary about two young African-American boys in Chicago. They got a scholarship to go to a high school. One basically flunked out. The other one stayed in. They both were in sports, okay? And that was their dream. But we all know, the three of us, that only a tiny number make that.
It's
right?
such an incredible few. And the thing is, so when young people say, I'm going to be a professional basketball player or football or baseball or hockey, whatever it is, it's such a tough road with so many obstacles. Mark, take us to break.
Okay. And it's interesting because Father Burke Masters in Joliet was a great baseball player in college, and he got offered a contract with one of the big league teams, and he said he had a greater calling. He was called to be a priest.
Right.
I mean, so there are some talented folks that even don't opt that way. Anyway, like you, Father Greg, he said no to that contract.
You could have
With
been a
the
movie star.
Chicago Bears.
You could have been a
You're
movie
right.
star.
You could have been a
dreams.
movie star with your communication skills, going out to Hollywood land.
Play the part of a weeping willow.
Time to take a break. WNDZ 750 AM, Catholic Chicago. Go to youtube.com/Catholic Chicago. We'll be back. Dr. Edward Gordon. In a few minutes, please stay tuned. We continue to talk about our future. And maybe the next segment is what needs to be done on our end.
Well, let's talk.
Okay, time out.
We'll be-
Hold it, Edward.
We'll be back. We'll be back in a few minutes.
He's raring to go.
I know. Please stay
We haven't
tuned.
started the break yet.
Well, we.
Community is core to Catholic Charity's founding mission. For more than 100 years, we have met people and families where they are, serving anyone in need, regardless of their faith, gender, race, or ethnicity. As our world absorbs the economic, political, and social aftershocks of the pandemic, 50% or more of the 6 million people living in Cook and Lake counties have little or no savings. They are a paycheck away from zero. We are deeply grateful to everyone in the Catholic Charities community who partners with us to alleviate the suffering of the people we serve and offer them a better path forward. We are witnessing a message of mercy and hope to a world very much in need. Learn more at CatholicCharities.net.
People always say, how can you spend your day with 3-year-olds? Seeing the changes that they go through and just the journey and how they grow, this is a very rewarding job. Even though at the end of the day, we're not the highest paid people on earth. And when I have a parent contact me and say, my child loves school, that to me, I'm setting that foundation for their love of learning. Because really, you are changing lives. You are molding lives.
Shape the next generation of leaders. Teach. Apply today at archchicago.org/schooljobs.
For more than 20 years, Catholic Charities Adult Protective Services has been advocating for seniors who are the victims of abuse, neglect, confinement, or financial exploitation. With our partners at local, city, and state agencies, our trained case managers follow through on every concern that is brought to our attention in a cooperative way to ensure that our seniors are safe and protected. According to the Illinois Department on Aging, last year nearly 21,000 cases of elder abuse were reported in Illinois. Of these, only 5% were reported by seniors themselves. So raising awareness is an important part of this issue. If you are concerned about a senior you know, call 800 252 8966. That's 800 252 8966. With your help, we can stop elder abuse and look out for the seniors in our lives.
Now we are back. WNDZ 750 AM, Catholic Chicago. Go to youtube.com/Catholic Chicago with Dr. Edward Gordon. Fascinating show. And Father Greg had said during the break, you're on fire about these issues.
You are revved up today, Edward.
Well,
but you usually are.
And they touch your heart because they're talking about education, young people.
Passionate about this.
We're talking about you had said during the break, one of the things we need to talk about, inflation, the interest rates. How does that impact all these issues we're talking about?
Last year, I was asked to serve on the Federal Reserve's Economic Roundtable. We meet quarterly, and economists from many different industries report on jobs and how the business is doing. Consistently, they report that they have a hard time finding workers. Most of them do not train. Now, interest rates have been going up, and the reason interest rates are going up is that the Federal Reserve wants to tap down inflation, which is right now running at about 4.6%, but the core inflation is 5.5%. They wanted it 2%. All right? The way to control inflation, what the Federal Reserve will tell you, is if you raise interest, then companies, it costs more to buy things, finance houses, etc., and companies will not also borrow so much money to expand. So that will cool down the economy. Usually, inflation is caused by people buying goods, cars, houses, and there's a shortage of cars, a shortage of houses, all right? And that, in turn, causes inflation. All right. A lot of money was pumped into the economy during COVID in order to save the country from having a depression, since people were laid off.
Was this back in 2008?
No, this is now back at the beginning of COVID.
Okay,
there were economic supports to businesses for salaries for workers, et cetera. All right, and people were able to get that in unemployment compensation. So right now, a lot of people are traveling. For Memorial Day, they'll break all records. People are tired of sitting at home, et cetera, et cetera. All right. Well, now we see goods and services catching up to demand. But what we're not seeing is the number of skilled people, an adequate supply. Go to the hospital. You get sick. Go to the emergency room. How long are you sitting in an emergency room? Hours. You want surgery, elective surgery. You have to wait months or more, or just to get an appointment with a doctor. Well, why is this happening, Ed? Well, a lot of doctors are retiring right now, all right? And there's a demand, all right? So what we see is companies now are scurrying to fill these jobs. There are millions and millions of vacant jobs. Well, how are they filling them? Well, they can import people from other countries. There is a worldwide shortage of these skilled people, including India, China, Japan, Germany, all these countries. There's not enough to go around. Second, they could poach from other people. Well, that's happening, and right now 45% of small businesses have vacant jobs, and they can't keep people. They're being poached by the bigger companies. 45% of small, these are companies of 500 employees or less.
You see signs all over the place.
Right. But these are skilled jobs. I'm not talking just about waiter jobs, etc.
But even those jobs
are skilled.
Well,
restaurants can't fill them.
Well, restaurants, I'll tell you right now, they're starting to train people to fill those jobs. And there are companies, more companies now are training now than previously. But that's the other way. You take someone who has some of the skills and you train them into the job, all right? Well, companies have been, their finance people say we're not investing long-term in workers. They'll be poached. The economy will change. We're not going to do that. So what's happening now is that the pay increases first quarter of this year over 5%. Now, is that going to change? Well, I'll tell you right now, from what we can see, the demand with 79 million people who are boomers retiring between 2010 and 2030, and about a third of those were skilled to fill these jobs that we need to fill. We're going to see companies pumping more and more money into trying to attract skilled people. And wages, there will be wage inflation. How much remains to be seen. The more companies invest in training and development and educational programs for their current workers and for entry-level people, we will bring that under control. My point that I make today to your audience, and when I sit with the Federal Reserve, is that raising interest rates are not going to solve this problem.
Right.
The problem is knowledge. We are, the job market is on fire right now. It's burning itself out because we don't have enough skilled people to support this economy. That is what's going on.
Is it getting worse?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
And don't you feel the longevity of employees, too, is an issue?
Yes.
Because they don't, this is just my perception, but many of them don't seem to stick around long enough to really have it worthwhile for a company to invest that kind of
Well, but many of them want training and they won't get it.
Oh, okay.
Many of them want a career ladder and there is none.
Yeah.
All right? So, look, you have to look at companies company by company. And there are companies out there that are investing, Greg, in a lot of things. All
But
right?
some are not.
Most aren't.
Yeah.
Most aren't.
We have about 15, 20 seconds.
Yes.
Edward, give us a closing summary comment.
Parents, emphasize education for your children. Make that the highest priority. It doesn't mean they're going to be college professors or doctors or scientists inventing things, but it does mean they can get a good job and stay in the middle class. Without that, they will not prosper. That is the most important thing you can give them.
Okay.
And they need to learn to read and read and read.
I know you are a reading machine, and want to thank in a very special way, whose close program this morning, is Dr. Edward Gordon, historian, researcher, writer, speaker. How many? About 20 books. So thank you, Dr. Gordon,
You're
for being
welcome.
with us around this Memorial Day.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you also to our co-host, Mark Teresi.
Thank you.
To our producers, engineers, to Michael May and Brian Hockey at Menbrock and Clint Cottrell. And to our listeners, have a very wonderful, safe Memorial Day. We pray for those who gave their lives for our country. God bless.
Amen.
Join us every Monday through Friday at this time for Catholic Chicago. You can stream our programs live or listen to past programs by visiting our website, archchicago.org, and clicking on Radio TV. And please connect with Catholic Chicago on social media.